Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. And it's moments like this that justify all the work of gardening. This is what we garden for, to be able to just take stock on a beautiful spring day and really enjoy the way that the blossom is appearing daily. And the daffodils are looking really good. And I'm very happy with the yellow at this time of year, particularly from the daffodil Avalon, which has got exactly that paleness that I want in this border. There's a forsythia too, Forsythia Nymans, which is very late, but it's worth waiting for because again, it's got that soft tone to the yellow. And the color scheme here on the mound is pale yellow and pale blue. And I certainly have got the yellow right, but probably not enough blue. One way of getting more blue in at the same time of the daffodils is to have muscari. So what I've done is brought a pot of muscari out, and I'll leave them here to seed. And muscari do spread by seed very readily. And in future weeks, I will be adding more blue too, but for the moment, I'm just letting the yellow wash over me. On today's program, Carol will be sharing her tips and inspiration to guarantee colour and interest in all your beds and borders and containers right throughout the seasons.
And I hope that I'm going to inspire you to try all sorts of things in exciting ways.
We'll be heading to West Wales to discover more about the Welsh national flower, the daffodil.
Some people just think daffodils are all yellow, but there's a big range of whites and yellows and pinks and oranges. And this time of the year, the daffodils are fabulous.
And I'll be showing you behind the scenes on my journey to the RHS Chelsea Flower Show, where I'm creating my first show garden, with help from Ned, of course. I would be a liar if I said I wasn't nervous. I really like the idea of making a garden the way that a dog sees a garden rather than a human. This is the writing garden. And essentially it's a white garden. But like all white gardens, it's predominantly green. But at this time of year, there is a lot of white. The leucojum are dominating. These are the snowflake. And then, of course, the tulips underneath that. We've got the white pulmonaria. We have a tulip called Lady Jane, which is actually pink on the outside and white on the inside, which I planted to mimic apple blossom. One slight problem is that by the time the apple blossom is out, Lady Jane, the tulip, is finished. But never mind, it's the right idea. Now, one of the plants that features early in the year is this. This is winter flowering honeysuckle, Lonicera fragrantissima. And it flowers on wood that is produced in the previous season. So if you want to prune it, you need to do so now, immediately after flowering. And that applies to all really early flowering woody shrubs. You can probably see that there's new growth already coming there. And that's what will carry next year's flowers. So this arching stem here, I could take that right back, say to there, that can come out. Sorry, Ned. Really old growth that you feel is not very productive, go right down to the base. But never take out more than a third of the old growth in any one year because that weakens it too much. Otherwise, just cut back so you've got a bit of a framework. And what I want here is a sort of curving backdrop. And then all this growth underneath, getting some sunlight. Let's stand back and have a look. There's always that thing when you're pruning. You're busy pruning away and going well, and then suddenly it's sort of like when you're cutting someone's hair, you think, ooh, that's gone a bit far. So it's a good idea to stand back, have a look. And in fact, I've got a nice curve on that. But this is very much a plant of winter. To get the best from your garden at all times of year, then sometimes you need a bit of expert advice. And who better, both for expertise and inspiration, than Carol.
The thing I love most about gardening in a temperate climate is the way that everything changes. day by day, everything's different. And gradually, one season changes into another. And each one of those seasons has its very own character, its own personality, defined, of course, by the plants that grow then. This year, I want you to come with me and see how my garden changes through the seasons. And I hope that I'm going to inspire you to try all sorts of things. New plants, old favourites, putting them together in exciting ways. I'm showing you how, with some clever planting and combinations, it's possible to have beautiful borders and containers full of colour and interest all through the seasons. Of all the plants you could think of, probably the primrose epitomises spring more than any other. Now, they're in their element. This is a straightforward, our native primula, Primula vulgaris. Vulgaris means common, and it is fairly widespread up and down the country. And just look at them here. I've got Euphorbia amygdaloides, our wood spurge, and this is a variety called Robbii. It's a brilliant ground cover, but here it's making this sort of curtain, and through its stems you can glimpse even more primroses. I just think it's beautiful. I think this is one of the loveliest combinations in the whole garden, and it's very much of this time, of this moment. So the centrepiece here is this trillium. It's Trillium chloropetalum. I love everything about it. Everything is in threes. It's got 3 big bracts round here. The petals are in threes too. It's even got these extra bits. And if you look into the centre of the flower, that's all in triplicate as well. Now, although it's a woodland plant, it grows deep down in between the roots of plants, which is why it'll come up year after year after year. And in the background, Arum metallicum, marmoratum pictum. Pictum just means painted, and that's exactly what those leaves look like. But taken together, what a glorious combination they are. While there's plenty going on in the garden, there's always an extra opportunity to get early spring colour, shape and texture into our garden, however big or small, even in a container. If you haven't got a garden, or you just want some sort of movable feast, then it's a great idea to celebrate early spring in this kind of way. Now, the centrepiece here is this lovely daffodil, and I think it goes brilliantly well with these gold lace. This is a primula too, a sort of polyanth, a lovely old-fashioned one with these dark velvety petals and golden centres. And I think that picks up the yellow in here, but to add even more pizzazz, I'm going to use this little anemone called ranunculoides, and it's related to wood anemones. Wood anemone is one of its parents, and I'm just going to squeeze in between. Doesn't it go well? It really looks just the part. Now, the whole point about something like this is you can enjoy it for the moment. You can move it where you want to, and you can enjoy that perfume, enjoy looking down on it. But then, when it's all faded down and your polyanthus could do with dividing and your anemone's just about going to sleep, you can put everything out into the garden and enjoy them year after year after year. I love this time of year, especially on this side of the garden. The canopy hasn't filled in overhead yet, and that means that all what I call Cinderella plants, all these lovely woodland treasures, are really making the most of the low light and the fact that the sun can actually get through. So we've got leucojums, we've got epimediums, we've got chinodoxa. It's absolutely glorious. And I've chosen this little bed to kind of put a bit of new life into. And I was prompted to do that because I've taken out this Anchianthus. It was absolutely bone dead, completely gone. And I've dug this ground over. I've taken out any sort of perennial weeds that are here, and I've added masses and masses of good compost. So this Ophiopogon, this lovely evergreen, I've got a clump down there and these clumps up here. But what I want to do is to kind of join the two together and make a sort of little rhythm through the bed. With a bit of leverage. Look at that. Completely separate, two brand new, beautiful big plants. And if I put them in here, and you just want to spread these roots out, gently tease this soil in amongst them and shake as I'm going, just to make sure that it's right in between all those fibrous roots. So this can act as a backdrop for all these lovely sparkling treasures we're going to plant in between. Woo-hoo! Well, the first thing I want to start with is one of my favourites. It's a anemone nemorosa. It's our own wood anemone. This is one called Robinsoniana, and it's this pale sort of misty blue. It's absolutely beautiful. And it moves. So although they're going to look like clumps right now, eventually they'll spread right the way through this bed and make this beautiful sort of carpet. Because every single one of these leaves and the flowers comes from a little rhizome. See those there? And those rhizomes live just under the ground and just move around under the fallen leaves, just a couple of inches below the surface of the soil. Another dainty addition to our shady scene is Anemonella thalictroides, so called because of the similarity of its leaves to the foliage of thalictrons. They're both members of the buttercup family, Ranunculaceae. Erythroniums are some of the most exquisite of spring woodlanders, with their reflexed petals and marbled leaves. They're bulbous, and their roots penetrate deeply into the spaces in between tree roots. Most of the things I'm adding to this bed are spring cinderellas, and will go to sleep during the summer. My Ophiopogon, my hellebores are evergreen, and I want to add these begonias too for another evergreen element. This is a begonia called Flirt. They're incredibly versatile plants. They'll cope with sun, dry shade like this. It's going to flourish perfectly in this sort of position. And its huge advantage, quite apart from the shape of its leaves, which are a lovely contrast, is their colour. Just look at that. It's like somebody's been round with a red boot polish. There's a bit of shine to it as well. So this bed's undergone quite a transformation. Of course, there are still spaces between the plants, but by next spring, the whole thing will be wall-to-wall foliage and flowers.
We'll be joining Carol throughout the year and learning from somebody who probably knows better than anybody alive of how to make those plant combinations so there is something special right throughout the year. The Taihaku cherry has been at its very best over the last few days. The leaves are beginning to come now, which means that in the next 48 hours, all those petals will gently come wafting down. But what's been fantastic this year is that there's been no rain and very little wind. So that means that the blossom has stayed longer than I've ever known it. And Taihaku is famous for being very brief. Most years it's 2 days, if you're lucky. This year, we've had a full week of what I think is the best cherry blossom in the world. The reason I've come here to the damp garden is to collect a hosta. Now is a really good time when you can see the new growth to divide, plant, move hostas of any kind. But also I want to try something else because I suppose I get more questions than anything else about slugs eating hostas. And nearly always that's to do with hostas in pots because my hostas here barely get touched by slugs or snails. And I want to take a couple so I can do this experiment to see how they grow in pots compared to the ground. So all you have to do is just get the spade and dig round it. And hosta roots are quite deep. This area floods, so these get a really good soak in the winter. And I find that as long as hostas get a good winter soak, they can take a surprising amount of summer dryness. Now, you can see that is a really substantial plant. So what I'm going to do now is just divide this, just lean the spade on it and apply pressure. And hopefully it'll be enough just to force it apart like that. That's cut through quite nicely. Very satisfying, sharp sound there. There we go. So, I have the smaller segment there, still a nice size hosta, and you can see the really woody roots, and that should grow with more vigor having been divided. So I'm going to put this back in the hole, like that. I'll fill around it. I will give that a really good soak. And this bigger chunk, I'm going to take back up and split it and pot it up so we can see how that grows compared to the one in the ground. I'm going to subdivide this division and plant each half in a pot. Same idea, rest it on and give it a good push. There we go. So, this is quite a large hosta, so it needs a large pot, and then give it a good rich compost so that it can access plenty of moisture and nutrition because it needs that to be healthy. And unless it's healthy, it'll become stressed, and if it's stressed, that's when it'll get eaten. So that's about the right height. I've got a mix here. I'll pack around it. This is 1/3 peat-free compost, 1/3 leaf mold, and 1/3 sieved garden compost. And I would expect this to be here in this pot for about another 2-3 years. Right, that's one, and now I've got the other. Never fill right to the brim. Leave at least an inch so that when you water it, you can flood it and it will soak gradually in. I will put these with the other pots that I've got over there. And what I've done is potted up a whole range of hostas just to see if my hostas can survive really well in containers as well as the ground and don't get eaten by slugs and snails. Right, I'll leave those there for the moment. I've got another job I need to get on with. I've got the grass borders on this side, which at this time of year are only just beginning to show new green and grow. And the jewel garden on the other side of the path has had big changes this year. We still wanted it to be the jewel garden as it's always been, but we needed to just rethink the planting. Given all that we've learned, given that we've got climate change, given that we're getting older and therefore we want to reduce maintenance a little bit, how would we plant it? And one of the things I decided to do is add more grasses. I did add a few Miscanthus sacchariflorus last year. They're down at the end, and I didn't cut them back because I wanted to see how they looked. And I've decided to add more. Miscanthus is one of those grasses that is very forgiving. It's very adaptable. It will grow in most soils and most situations. So a great place to start if you're not used to growing grasses. And sacchariflorus is huge. It's the biggest of the lot. It grows 14, 15, 16 foot tall. So I want these to go in the middle of the borders where they can compete with the vigor of all the growth around them. Grasses are best planted when the soil warms up. Now, that will vary from garden to garden and place to place. Right, let's see if I can get out the pot. There we go. Right. Right. Don't plant it too deep. When you're planting any grasses, if in doubt, put it on a slight mound. That is actually perfect. Right. We're going to visit one of your gardens now. It takes us to Scotland. It belongs to Jess Goddard. And although it's small, it's full of lovely things.
Hi Gardeners World, my name's Jess and welcome to my balcony garden in Glasgow.
When I first moved to Scotland, I was delighted to find that my flat had a balcony, and so I started to create a garden. My balcony is small, but it doesn't stop me from filling it with as many plants as I can. I have 2 microclimates, one on each side, a dry side and a damp side. I learnt this because all the plants on one side kept dying because they were getting too wet. So I switched it up and started growing hostas and ferns on the damp side and moved everything else to the dry side. And since I've done that, it's worked really well. The conditions on my balcony can be quite unpredictable, but the plants adapt really well to the conditions as long as I put them in the right place and protect them from getting too wet. My favourite thing in my garden is my Devon Green hosta because I really like the leaf shape and the colour. Most of the hostas in my garden were given to me by my dad, who divided the ones from his own garden. I love that even 8 hours apart, we can chat about the same plants and their progress, just like I used to when I lived back at home. It makes it feel extra special. This is my first garden, and I'm really proud of what I've created, and I hope that you've enjoyed it too.
I love the enthusiasm. And of course, you can get that from any space. You don't need a big garden or a garden at all to really get the pleasure from plants. And funnily enough, I could really relate to Jess's balcony because that thing of having one area quite close to another with very different growing conditions, we've got exactly here in the herb garden. On this side of the path, the bigger side, it gets full sun in summer and at least half a day in winter. And we grow Mediterranean herbs in there without too much trouble. But once you get back into this space, the shadow is quite deep and no herb thrives in deep shade. However, some will cope with shade much better than others. I've got here some chives, which are really good. Chives are probably the easiest herb of all to grow. Easy to grow from seed, and when you cut them, they regrow really fast. And as long as they get 3 or 4 hours of sunlight, they're good for shade. I've also got mint. Now, listen carefully. Do not plant mint into any kind of border because they are very, very invasive. However, they're brilliant in a pot or a container of any kind. And I've got 3 types of mint here. I've got apple mint, which is the best mint to add to new potatoes. I've got spearmint, which as an all-round mint is probably the best for cooking, and peppermint, which I think makes the best mint for drinking. And I'm going to put them in pots, but not the same pot, because they muddy each other's taste. Now, this is a particular favourite of mine. I'm not sure you could technically call it a herb, but I'm going to. It's red-veined sorrel. It's got a distinct tangy taste, and I think it's a really good plant to add to all kinds of things. You can cook with it, you can add it to salads. It's just an unusual and beautiful plant. You all right, Ned? You okay? Do you want to come and help me? Nope. Now, I'm going to start with the sorrel. The sorrel, of course, is a perennial, and so it does come back year on year. When you're preparing the soil for any herbs, always err on the side of too much drainage rather than too little. And just remember that herbs and sun go together. If you've got shade, cut your cloth accordingly, reduce the options, and just enjoy what will grow successfully. Come on. Good boy. I have taken on this year another garden away from Longmeadow, and its deadline for completion is approaching fast. I've lived with dogs all my life, so it's natural for me to be always accompanied by a dog or two, especially in the garden. I mean, my wife always says that I understand dogs better than I do people. I've never in my life had a garden without dogs. They are as much part of the garden as plants. So last year, when I got a call from the RHS and Radio 2 asking if I would consider designing a garden that celebrated dogs and gardening at Chelsea, I was up for the challenge. And could depend on Ned to give me a helping hand.
To have Monty and Ned designing the RHS garden, I mean, I think it's a dream come true for us. We're very conscious that right now it's really difficult times, and so we thought, why not actually celebrate some of the things that people in this country love the most? Gardens and dogs, bringing them together with Monty and Ned in one great big package, I think would just bring joy to the nation.
I knew that if I was going to be able to do this, I would need the help of the very best team available. So I enlisted the nurseryman Jamie Butterworth, who has established himself with a gold medal pedigree from RHS Chelsea.
When I got the call from Monty the first time, I couldn't quite believe it. Actually, not only is it RHS Chelsea Flower Show, which is the biggest flower show in the world, but it's Monty Don. He's the reason I got into gardening in the first place.
As excitement about the garden began to grow, over on Radio 2, DJ, RHS ambassador, gardening enthusiast and dog lover Joe Wiley has been on hand, offering us support.
The garden is all about reflecting the special place that dogs hold in our hearts and our gardens.
Ned has had a formal invitation, so I think everybody involved should bring their dogs and let chaos reign.
Monty, stop!
Just...
You are so mischievous.
This is Monty's design, it's his vision, it's his garden at Chelsea. But my job is to bring it into reality and actually create what's in Monty's head.
I would be a liar if I said I wasn't nervous. I really like the idea of making a garden or having a part of a garden that really catered for the way that a dog sees a garden rather than a human. I wanted it to be a place where dogs would feel happy and at home, and that the human element would enjoy it as a garden, and just where those two things met. Today, Jamie has brought some sample bricks for the Chelsea Garden paths, which we hope will give it just a little nod to Longmeadow. But like everything else, the devil is in the detail. How are you?
Really good to see you again.
What have you got here? God, you've got a lot.
A load of bricks.
This type, which is very like what we call a lamp brick, which is really heavy and solid, makes brilliant paths.
Yes.
Absolutely brilliant. But these, which are old bricks, are much nicer colour. In addition to the brick paths, my garden design includes an area for dogs to explore in their own mazy way, a selection of trees, a flower meadow, a stream to wallow in, a lawn, and a building which is a combination of a summer house and an enormous kennel. Oh, and there'll obviously be a couple of chewed balls. It's more than just a jokey dog garden, although there's an element of that. It's somewhere where dogs are part of a family. And that family may be one person and two dogs. It might be, it could be any combination, but it's part of a life. And yeah, I think that's the core of it. If we can achieve that, I'll be happy. For the planting, I've chosen very familiar trees and shrubs like hazel, field maple and crabapple, along with a ball theme, including circular flowers and topiary, and of course there'll be dogwood in there too. I'm assuming that everything's going swimmingly in the polytunnels. How are the plants?
The plants are growing, which is a good start.
Yeah.
We can't second guess or know what it's going to do is the weather. And obviously, it's incredible today. And if we have this between now and Chelsea, we'll mostly be looking at a palette that would, in normal years, be in flower in June. Yeah. So we'll have to say goodbye to the tulips and some of the bulbs that we wanted to use, whereas we could still get snow next week. Yeah. It's that time of year where we just don't know what's going to happen.
On the one hand, we're not being judged, so therefore no one's going to take points off if something is not perfect. On the other hand, it's got to be perfect.
It has to be perfect.
Yes. I do want people to like it. I want people to love it. And if I equip myself well, phew. And if I don't, well, it'll be embarrassing and it will be a pity, but it won't be for want of trying. With just weeks left until Chelsea, the biggest decisions are still to be made. So I've come to the nursery, where they've marked out the garden to scale. Now I can really start to understand the space and place the trees and shrubs and discuss the structural bones of the design with Jamie and his team. Very nice.
This is your garden.
It's glorious. So let's just stop here. Let's leave this like this. Oh, hi. How are you?
Monty.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. How are you?
I'm all right.
Good.
I'm okay.
Good.
I'm sort of
scratching your head.
yeah. Well, I'm somewhere between excitement and just pure cold panic. Actually. One of the crucial features to get right is the garden's summer house, including my own love of reclaimed material for garden buildings. But at the moment, we have a small problem interpreting the idea into reality. As if it's too derelict, it cuts out everybody who has no access to a derelict building, and then it becomes a stage set.
Yeah.
And I want to avoid that. The armchair could be on that side, sofa on that side. But I don't think we want a great big window.
Yeah.
Dogs are exactly where the seats are going to be. I think that's a doggy seal of approval. There is almost nothing that you can think of that doesn't have to have a decision made about it, and lots of things you haven't thought of that have to have a decision made about it. One thing that we just have to decide today is the exact placement of the trees. Okay, you're good? You're good? What that means is we don't need something like that in there. And that takes a lot of fine-tuning. So Jo's arrival is a welcome relief, and she's here to get a dog garden update for her listeners. It's all about detail for me. Inches will make a difference. The difference between being dead right and okay is small, but critical. Having finished our radio interview, we've still got a lot of trees to place. So Jo lends us a hand. So we're trying to create a foreground of trees where you look through the stems. Yeah, that's much more like it. Much more like it.
That's gorgeous.
That's great.
The height is right.
Yeah.
And the width. They're just working things out at the moment. That's exactly what's happening. It's like, does this look right here? No, it's not quite right. Just moving stuff around. It's actually quite frantic and quite manic.
I quite like the idea of you having the gate in the corner.
That's nice.
Yeah. So that's exactly where Jo is now. Jo, you are the gate.
I am the gate.
Slightly over. That's
To
it.
left?
Perfect. You're gate-tastic.
I'm
That's
the
it.
gate. Is this garden going to be judged not by judges, no, but by people. It's going to be so scrutinised. Everybody is going to have a view about this garden. He's a very brave man, Monty Don.
We started this journey last July. We're committed. Can't get out of it. Got to go ahead. We are 2-3 steps closer to what we're trying to achieve. From the outset, I wanted to be sure that the finished garden was somewhere that was good for both people and dogs, which is where my co-designer, Ned, comes in. That's your bit there, OK? You're going to design that, OK? Got that? Good boy. So last week, Ned and I went to Jamie's nursery together to decide, from a dog's point of view, where the pathway should go.
Hello, Ned. How are you? This is the garden plan, and we had made some sort of tenuous nods as to where the dog paths might go, but obviously it was always going to be designed by Ned. And so I've got a blank corner here that as we watch Ned wander through the garden, we can actually map it out, and that is what we will build at Chelsea.
To make it easier for ourselves and Ned, we've made the planting area twice the size that it's actually going to be at Chelsea. So now, all we have to do is watch Ned's progress as he maps out our paths. There was a distinct sense of that, wasn't there? Yeah. Actually, watching Ned go through it was quite interesting. It was quite instructive.
We did genuinely learn how Ned behaved within the space, and we will genuinely use that in the
Yes,
job.
exactly.
It's the Chelsea conundrum. It's trying to be as authentic as possible whilst putting it on the world stage, and it's a battle every year.
I sort of feel like someone who's dived into a deep pool and you're nearing the bottom part of the dive, and therefore the only way is to get out, you've got to go up.
We're sort of out of the worst bit now because it's only going to get more exciting.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen, it's real, and we're surrounded by it, and it's quite lovely. And I hope it's this calm at Chelsea, I really do. It won't be. It really won't be.
I'm very aware that that's the story so far. There's another month to go, an awful lot to do, an awful lot that can go wrong. But let's be positive, an awful lot that hopefully will go right. And we'll share all that with you when we get to Chelsea. And of course, you'll be able to see the finished garden. So fingers crossed. Now, Chelsea coverage starts on the 18th of May, and we'll have more coverage of this journey towards completing the dog garden. And if you want more news about it, then Radio 2 is really involved, and Joe Wiley has been a great partner from the very beginning. These 4 raised beds last year had cut flowers in them. And this year we've got bulbs that I'm trialling. These are all bulbs that I've never grown before, types of tulip, types of daffodil. In fact, they're coming through really nicely. We've got hardy annuals in that bed, dahlias, which have overwintered in that bed. And this bed I cleared. And actually, I'm not going to use it for cut flowers because it makes a really good seed bed. Now, a seed bed saves a whole load of money. You don't need seed trays, you don't need to buy compost, you don't need a greenhouse. All you need is a spare patch of ground, and it can be just a metre square. And some plants react really well to growing in soil as opposed to growing in compost, and it tends to be the brassica family. Now, we all think of brassicas as vegetables, but actually it's quite a wide family. So it includes rocket, it includes radish, it includes swedes and turnips, and also wallflowers. So I'm going to sow my wallflowers in here and grow them on with the idea next spring, because they're a biennial, of having a really good crop. If you're growing biennials, now is a really good time to grow them. You do need to prepare the seedbed well. It needs to have not too many lumps and bumps. So rake it and take out any obvious big stones or clumpy soil. And I'm going to use a spacer that's quite narrow because they're not going to grow very big before I transplant them. So this will do fine. And that fits in there. Now, I'm going to start with a variety called Blood Red. And wallflowers are a fantastic companion to tulips. And of course, the other thing about wallflowers is they have some of the best fragrance of any flower you can grow. They have a really honey fragrance. All you need to do is with your hand, just draw a little drill like that, and down the other side, and sprinkle the seeds thinly. Now, this is the tricky bit. Ideally, you want each seed to be about 1 inch apart. Now that's, in practice, impossible. But try and just space them out the best you can so that you don't waste seed. Having done that, just lightly cover them over. And the easiest way to do it is just run a thumb and a finger down either side of the furrow. And that just pulls the soil across it. I will grow these on, and then when they're large enough to handle, I will move them so they can develop into nice, strong, bushy plants. And then in autumn, transplant them. And hopefully next year, I'll have a really good display of wallflowers. I have to overwinter all my salvias, but in the greenhouse, they do have an inclination to keep growing, sometimes even flowering quite well, and they get leggy because the light levels are low. So it's a good idea to cut them back so the new growth that comes through is nice and strong and robust. However, what you cut back very often provides really good cutting materials. And of course, cuttings is one of the most rewarding ways of making new plants. There is a genuine magic about it. And I have to say, it's a really economical way of producing new plants too. These salvias, there's Salvia garanetica here, Salvia fulgens, might cost between 10 and 30 pounds. In a garden centre, might create up to a dozen cuttings. Now you can see here on the fulgens this soft new growth, and these are softwood cuttings, and if you can bend it over without breaking it, then it's a softwood cutting. So first things first, have your material mixed up, and this is a very, very free draining material. It's about 2/3 perlite, 1/3 compost. You can do it in pure perlite. Have your pots you're going to put them into ready. So we're going to take it from the end. If I just take that, and having taken the cuttings, I'm then going to cut excess foliage because there's water released by foliage, and water loss is what's going to kill it. So that's one. Got another one here, cut it beneath the node. The node, by the way, is just the point at which leaves or side shoots emerge on the stem. Perfectly good. And another. Now, this one, that is not a node. So that length there is less likely to produce roots than that point there. So we'll cut it off. Like that. So now I have my cuttings. Make a hole and go into the corner of the pot, burying it about half its length. Now this is where you have to be quick. And then, and this is critical, you will need a bag. But these locking bags, they're a game changer because all you do is just put them over, pull the zip tight, and that now is sealed around it. And what it does is it stops evaporation. That will keep it alive long enough to produce new roots. Put it somewhere sunny, pot them on in about 2-3 weeks' time, grow them on, and then plant them out later in summer. And as for the parent plant, harden it off for at least a week in a sheltered place outside if it's been indoors before planting out in mid-May. Now, there are still daffodils, thankfully, looking glorious. But I suspect that they were at their best a couple of weeks ago, which was when we went to West Wales to visit the small holding of Julian Warmold, where he had thousands of daffodils in glorious display.
Some people just think daffodils are all yellow, but there's a big range of whites and yellows and pinks and oranges. And this time of the year, the daffodils are fabulous. We're about 800 feet up here in North Carmarthenshire, and in the landscape, still at the end of March, in a year like this, there's almost no wildflowers, just a few celandines. And daffodils obviously give us that burst of spring colour. So they get us through the long grey days that we often experience here and the heavy rainfall. I'm Julian Warmold, and over the last probably 10 years I've started to acquire more named types of daffodils, and we've maybe got 240, 250, something like that now. We bought this property in 11 acres as a derelict small holding that hadn't been lived in for 30 years, and there was no garden and no landscaping. And gradually we started to work on the garden, but never with any plan. You just do a little bit at a time and you keep chipping away. The only garden flower that was here at that time was a very, very old daffodil growing on the access track bank that actually dates back to at least 1620. I started with snowdrops and gradually built up a big collection of maybe 150 different cultivars, and then started to look at daffodils. But with both snowdrops and daffodils, the thing that interests me most, in a way, is the social history and the human stories behind these flowers. This is the Tenby daffodil, which is native to this particular part of southwest Wales, and it's a species daffodil, Narcissus ovularis. And because it usually comes into flower on March the 1st, which is St David's Day, and it's a classic all-yellow daffodil, it's a great emblem for the Welsh national flower. Daffodils became popular in the 1800s, and the Tenby daff was part of a major hybridisation industry, where some flowers were highly prized. And this lovely daffodil is one called Brunswick, and it's one of our favourites because it flowers really early, it's tall, the flowers are probably the longest lasting of any daffodil that we have, and I really like the combination of the flower with the bluey green leaves. And when it was first launched in the late 1930s, early 1930s maybe, the people who first bought the bulbs had to pay about 450 quid in today's money to buy a single bulb, and they wouldn't have known whether it would be a good daff, but it's a great daff. Historic daffodils are often more subtle in colour and form than newer hybrids, and many have proven hardiness, although modern hybrids have stretched the range of flower types. So there are 13 different divisions, classifications if you like, for daffodils, and this one which we really like is a daffodil called Orange Comet, which is quite a recent hybrid that was created over in America. But it's Division 6 Cyclaminius, and all the cyclaminias have sweatback petals, and they all tend to thrive in very wet conditions, so we thought this would be a good one to try growing different sorts of here, and most of them do pretty well. And these are just going over, but then they've been in flower since the beginning of March, and we're now the 30th of March, so that's not bad going. Due to the hybridisation process, many daffodils don't set seed, but some do. These are Narcissus pseudo-Narcissus, which is the other native daffodil in the UK, and it's the daffodil that inspired Wordsworth in the Lake District to write his very famous poem about daffodils. It sets seed, even though it flowers early, and it probably produces more seed in a seed capsule than any of the other daffodils. All of the daffodils that you can see in this part of the field have got here just as a result of saving the seed and scattering it onto the surface of the meadow and then waiting. And it takes maybe 5-6 years for a daffodil seed to produce a bulb that's of flowering size. But actually that's a lot easier and a lot cheaper than planting lots and lots of bulbs. The meadow's grazed in the autumn and the daffodil seed is scattered at this time. The seed's pushed into the soil by a specially named sheep. Every year we get a new crop of lambs and we decided to give them daffodil names. So we've got a lovely ewe lamb, the first one to be born this year, which we've called Lalique, after a gorgeous daffodil actually that flowers later on. I've got a ewe called Jetfire from 2 years ago that's particularly friendly, and she will come and have nuts out of the bucket and she'll have her chin tickled. And Jetfire the daffodil is a lovely, reliable orange and yellow cyclaminous daffodil with swept-back petals that flowers fairly early. It's a very good doer. Renovating the house and creating the garden has been a long journey, but each spring, when the daffodils begin to flower again, we're so pleased we persevered.
I like the idea of spreading seed just directly onto meadows for daffodils. It's a lot easier than planting bulbs, and 5 years goes quickly enough. Now, some daffodils are becoming extremely rare, and the RHS would like your help in discovering 3 in particular. They are Mrs. R.O. Backhouse, Mrs. William Copeland, and Sussex Bonfire. And if you either have those growing in your garden or you've seen them, if you go to our website, you'll get instructions on what to do and how to contact the RHS. And if we do just get 1 or 2 of those and can collect the seed, then that keeps them for posterity. Come on. Easter has always been the traditional time when people planted their potatoes. Now is the time to get them in the ground. There are lots of ways of doing it. Potatoes actually are quite easy to grow, but to get the best from them, really you want to have them well covered, have them fairly deep, and also you need to make sure that they're not exposed to late frosts. And the best way to do that is to dig a sort of mini trench. Pull out the soil along a line or a board like I've got here. Pull that out. I've got them growing here next to strawberries, and strawberries and potatoes share pretty much the same growing conditions. They're like rich soil, plenty of moisture, and plenty of sunshine. If your soil is very thin, it doesn't hurt to put a layer of compost along the bottom. Now, this is a variety called Charlotte, which is a second early. First earlies are the traditional new potato. Second earlies, like Charlotte, they have the sweetness of new potatoes, but they store better. And Charlotte are one of my favorites. Now, when you're planting, the basic rule is that the closer together they are, the smaller the potatoes will be. Now, so with new potatoes, you don't want great big ones. By and large, I would say about a foot or so apart is fine. And these have chitted well. You can see that they've got a nice, firm, purpley green little bud on them. You can rub off any side ones. And that will put all the energy into that shoot, and so they will grow away faster. So we can pop that in there like that. All right, got 1 more in there. There's my friend the robin. Of course, if you're really short of space and you don't even have a garden, you can still grow potatoes because they grow very successfully in a large container or a sack. You need to puncture it to make sure they drain, keep them well watered, and they work perfectly well. When you're covering them over, you do not want any light to touch the tubers as they grow, otherwise they turn green and that can be poisonous. I've left enough space between the rows for earthing up. Now, earthing up is when you draw up soil over the emerging foliage. Right, now you've been watching me work, it's your turn. Here are your jobs for the weekend. If you're growing any of the late flowering clematis, you'll notice that they're now putting on masses of new growth. And this needs supporting. Use soft twine and never plastic or wire, as this new growth is very tender. And you may have to repeat this 2 or 3 more times until they develop their own tendrils that will support the weight. If you're growing tender annuals, like these cosmos, they will be starting to grow strongly and even developing some flower buds. But it's too early in the year for this. So be bold and be prepared to cut them back by up to half. And this will encourage lots of side shoots and strong bushy plants that will flower better and longer. If you're growing tomatoes, it's important to keep them growing so you have nice, strong plants when you put them out, either outdoors or in a greenhouse. But it's a bit early for both those. So, making sure they don't get root bound, pot them on either from a plug into a pot or from a small pot to a bigger one. And this will ensure that they continue their healthy growth and buy you some time. I always think that this is, above all, the time of blossom. And the great thing about blossom is you don't need big trees. You can have a socking great perry pear like the one behind me. But also, blossom works just as well, whether it's on the step-over apples or cordons. And of course, you can grow those in any size garden. So this Easter, just take time to relish the blossom and maybe a bit of time to get stuck into the garden too. And I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday at 8 o'clock. So until then, happy Easter and bye-bye.